The Beyond the Fame podcast is fed by Lido Pizza. Lido Pizza never cuts corners. For menu and locations, visit LidoPizza.com. This month's programming is sponsored by Wolf Trap, with over 50 summer concerts just announced, including Paul Simon, Heart, the Goo Goo Dolls, and many more. Pre-sales are happening now. Learn more about Wolf Trap membership and early access to tickets at wolftrap.org/membership. And of course, this podcast would not be possible without our longtime sponsor, the Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races in West Virginia. Upcoming entertainment includes I Mom So Hard on March 22nd. Must be 21 to enter the casino floor and attend a show. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Trailblazing director Charles Burnett is releasing a 4K restoration of his long-lost film, The Annihilation of Fish, a romance starring the late James Earl Jones and Lynn Redgrave, back in select theaters tomorrow for Valentine's Day. He joined me to discuss the re-release and reflect on his groundbreaking 1977 film Killer of Sheep, which ranks among the top 100 films of all time on the latest critics poll by Sight and Sound magazine. Hey, Charles Burnett. Hey, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's an honor.
It's my pleasure too. Thank you.
Legendary filmmaker, important filmmaker, is working with Kino Lorber and Milestone Films to present a 4K restoration of your long-lost feature, The Annihilation of Fish. It came out back in 1999, but it's newly remastered, ready to go for in theaters for Valentine's Day, fitting on February 14th. I think it'll be opening at BAM in New York first and then go to select theaters nationwide. But before we get into the actual premise of the movie, let's start with the restoration itself. So I believe it was UCLA, which is your alma mater, and the Film Foundation led by Scorsese, funding by George Lucas's foundation. So how involved were you in the restoration? Like, who came to who?
Well, it started at some point after graduating from UCLA. Ross Lippman was really responsible for preserving a lot of the UCLA Black films content and trying to get them restored because they were just left in the garages and places like that, and they were deteriorating. You know, smelling like alcohol, like Purex or whatever it is. Anyway, so he came to me and a bunch of other students and says, you know, I think we should look at putting your films and preserving your films because they're being destroyed. You know, it'd be too bad if they are not seen, you know. And so it started with them, and then Milestone came in and started to distribute these films, you know, after they were, you know, reconstituted, you might say, or restored, and that's how it got started. And then Milestone had it, and then the Criterion came in, and then it was like one step at another, you know, getting preserved. It was a great thing they did because they were deteriorating, you know. They were smelling like Purex, whatever it was. And anyway, they say, thank God they did. Because at UCLA, you made the film, and you made it for a thesis film, and that was it, you know, because they didn't have distribution for these films, you know, at all. And so we were very lucky to have people who were really diehard filmmakers or loving films that extended themselves and said, we ought to preserve this film. You know, there was a lady by the name of Mamie Clayton who had collected a lot of Black films was in existence for a while. And she was the first one I know that started doing that. And then it sort of picked up, and, you know, Oliver Franklin, Pearl Bowser, Cornelius Moore, people like that were getting these films and shipping them around to different communities, you know, and getting their reaction. And I think that's what saved not filmmakers, but European festivals started asking for and looking for and searching for these films. And it was through them that made it possible for a wider audience, you know, to see them and to write about them. And that helped a great deal. A lot of things came into play that really helped a great deal.
Absolutely. And I would love to get into some more of those early UCLA films that you're talking about, like sort of that whole movement in a minute. But let's keep going a little more in depth into the actual, movie of Annihilation of Fish so our listeners want to, check it out in theaters. So remind them of the basic premise of the movie. I mean, you and I know what it's about, but if they're tuning in for the first time, like you're saying, this is a long lost movie, so a lot of them, maybe some listeners weren't even born when it came out. That's what, 26 years ago. So yeah. Remind them, who the eccentric interracial couple is. Fish and Poinsettia. Tee it up for them.
Yeah, well, it came about through Tony Winkler, who was a scriptwriter. And he's Jamaican, very interesting guy, and has a strange sense of humor. You wouldn't imagine this came from him, in a way, because he was um, a person who worked for the education department, I think, looking at uh, examining children's books, school books, and from that he had written a number of short novels and everything like that. Really interesting films, and then I think Paul Hiller was associated with him earlier with some films. Paul Hiller is uh, what was really the one who kept it going year after year after year, and finally got the money to get make the film through Chris Dodge and Chris Dodge's uh, uh, his husband, Larry Dodge, put up the money to make the film, which was really great. And they were really great to work with because they said, look, I don't know anything about producing a film or directing a film. I'm just going to sit and watch you. And they kept their hands off and really made it a wonderful experience. It wasn't like certain director or producers who had to be in
Right.
there and just with their hands. They were like, look, you guys do what you do best, and we'll just put up the money and stay out. And that was the great thing about it.
And of course, the actual, premise follows Fish and Poinsettia. Fish is sort of battling this like invisible demon or whatever you want to call him, ghost Hank. Poinsettia is claimed to be married to a dead opera composer, Puccini, the legendary Puccini. So there's some like cool, transcendent, haunted, I guess, elements hanging over the actual romance here.
For them, Puccini and the demon were real.
Yeah.
It says part of the imagination, but they're actually guided by these demons in a way.
They
It's a love
believe it.
relationship
It's real to them.
and I hope it's real to the audience because when we see the fish fighting the demon, there's little moments there that appear to be maybe he does exist,
Right.
because when he throws him out of the window, you see the leaves shake, when it hits the bushes.
Yeah.
And so you say, well, maybe there is something to his imagination. The same way with Poinsettia, she's spent all these years looking for the man in her dreams, and she claims that uh, uh, Puccini wrote those songs for her. She really believes that he wrote those songs and for her benefit, but she knows he's lying. You know, she comes to that conclusion. And the one who saves her was a person who has his own demons and imagination confront. That's James Earl Jones' character Fish, who thinks uh, his value is in saving innocent people from the devil. you know. And so his whole reason for living is to keep the devil at bay. And so and he believes in it. And then he gets Poinsettia to believe in it.
Yeah.
And then Fish believes in her fantasies. And so it's like you need people like that who encourage you to believe in these things. And they don't
Yeah.
become real. They become real because they are real to you and to people who identify with you and your problems.
Absolutely. And it gives it like an eternal quality, especially now that especially sadly, both leads have passed away. Like James Earl Jones, sadly, we just lost him, back in the last fall, a few months ago. And then, and Lynn Redgrave, sister of Vanessa Redgrave, died back in 2010, I guess. But when you cast them, they were both obviously well known. I mean, Redgrave had just been nominated, I guess, the year before for the Oscar for Gods and Monsters, and of course, James Earl Jones was already an icon in '99. I mean, that was exactly 10 years after Field of Dreams, and I guess 22 years after Star Wars. So anyway, he was a big name. So obviously, their credentials and acclaim and credibility was there to make them bankable cast. But
Yeah.
why? why creatively as the filmmaker, why were they each perfect for the roles of Fish and Poinsettia? Like what qualities in their performance styles did you notice that you wanted to pluck out and put in this specifically?
We tried a number of people to see if they were interested in, and there was this confusion about who said yes and who said no and that sort of thing like that. And Paul Heller kept it going. He kept going from one actor to another because uh, it was one of these kind of things where you needed supportive actors because before a producer or anyone thought it was a film, they had to believe in the story. And it wasn't until they came aboard that the producers, not Chris uh, Dodge, Chris Dodge, and Larry Dodge. But for Hollywood producers, they needed something more, and it was hard for them to see the story and the characters. It wasn't until we had Lynn Redgrave and James Earl Jones who just came aboard and wanted to do it immediately, and had ideas that were really terrific. And then people started thinking of it as a movie. But it took the initiative of Paul Heller and Tony Winkler to persist and keep at it, over the years, because it took us a number of years to get the money to finance and to do the film.
And also we should mention supporting role the landlady Margot Kidder of I guess about 20 years after Superman and Amityville Horror and all that stuff. So there's three well-known casts in this. We encourage everyone to check it out. In addition to teasing Annihilation of Fish, and we can wrap full circle at the end back around to, but I would like to give you your flowers and touch on some of your, coming up backstory, UCLA and all that stuff. So I guess you were born in 44 in Vicksburg, Mississippi, famous for, the Union beating Confederacy, and it was one of the Civil War battles there with Grant winning. But I guess at like age 3 you moved to LA, specifically Watts, where the riots were in 65 during civil rights movement. So mostly you grew up in Watts, but how did your unique story of born to Southern roots, but then growing up in, LA childhood, how do you think that shaped you as a unique vessel to tackle stories from a unique perspective about life in America?
Well, the thing about Vicksburg and Los Angeles, it was the same in many ways. Every place in Vicksburg was a group of people who were from the South. My whole neighborhood, they were all from Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, you name all this. It was a Southern experience there. So when you left, you brought all that with you.
Right.
It was a community, like Watson was so segregated, LA was so segregated until everyone spoke the same language. The same churches moved to Los Angeles and Detroit and all those places like that. Um, and so you really hadn't left the South, and all your history and everything was talked about at churches and your neighbors and so forth. It was really Southern in many ways. It didn't have the mosquitoes that they had in Mississippi and places like that, or rivers like they did, but churches were the same, people were the same language, the same, voices. It was, so you really didn't leave the South. All the metaphors and everything was Southern. And so, again, it was like being back home. And all the older people walk the streets or whatever it is, the barber shops, it was Southern. And so you really hadn't left it.
Thank you. I love that you're saying that how you kind of tie those two. Well, on the surface seemed miles apart, literally, but you're saying that there was a lot of interplay there. I like that. All right. Well, now the part that everyone knows you from is UCLA. I guess you had gone and got a bachelor's in writing languages at UCLA early, but then your MFA at UCLA Film School is what really launched you and your fellow classmates. The Black independent film movement would sort of come out of that in the late 70s. You would even go on to crew for Julie Dash long before she made Daughters in the Dust. Like there was all were like working together. So let's remind our listeners, your master's thesis was Killer of Sheep in 77, cinema verite, gritty style handheld cameras, life in LA, sort of decades before John Singleton would do Boys in the Hood or F. Gary Gray, Friday. Like that's the ones I grew up with in the 90s, but you were doing it way back in the 70s. I think Mos Def, the rapper, even used the still of the roof jumping scene as the cover of the Ecstatic, his album in 2009. These are my touchstones, but you were influencing back in the 70s. It's easier for us to take for granted, people my age now, but talk about how groundbreaking it was to just be shooting life in LA, in this cinema verite, almost Italian neorealist style, but you're doing it in LA. Like, why was that so important to finally be showing that?
Well, I think one of the reason I got into filmmaking was to bring filmmaking to South Central. and to show young kids how to make films, and that if you can turn on a hi-fi, you can you can operate an Naga 4, an Naga 3, whatever, or camera or Eclair or whatever. So I wanted to show that because when studios came come to the neighborhood and shoot, films, and they had this attitude like in the neighborhood, oh, stay away, you wouldn't understand, it's too deep for you. And you find, no, anyone can learn that. If they can do it, you can do it. And so
Yep.
that was the whole idea of filming social change, bringing the kids and get them involved, because when I did Killer Sheep, that they were helping changing film camera loads and things like that, doing sound and so forth. And so when they came to the set, we encouraged them to come. It wasn't about, oh, you stay away, it's too deep for you. We looked at them and said, look, if I can do it, you can do it. It's going to be available
Absolutely.
for you someday. Like when I was coming up, like to consider yourself wanting to be a cameraman, it took 15 years because the unions were so strong and kept you out, until in order to become a first cameraman, you had to wait your turn in the union order of things to get that opportunity. And
Yeah.
so waiting 15 years, you never get a chance to do that. So it was kept kind of like secret and private. And what we try to do is say, look, you could do this. If you can play a stereo, you can do this. And so we try to make it possible, and for it to be in their way of thinking, because it's a lot of money involved in it. But what you want to do is not so much money, but do the right thing and make the right movies and subject matter. Because these exploitation films that that's not even, we never looked at those as films as such. But it was like,
Right.
let's make something that is relevant, that change your life, and you can be involved in it. As an art form. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
And one of the good things about UCLA is that they made it available. And you had to work on other filmmakers' films.
Yeah.
And so it really was a good place to be.
Yeah. Thank you for making it possible for a whole new generation of film. Like you're saying, showing that it can be done and not just the blaxploitation, that the stuff that was happening earlier in the decade. You really show, well, I guess you had, Oscar Michaud and some of the exceptions to the rule way
Yeah.
back before, but for the most part, it makes me so sad. Some of the greatest films were never made because folks weren't allowed to make them. So thank you for showing that it could be done. I want to geek out on some of the visual thematic symbolism of Killer of Sheep, like in the title. So you juxtapose the image of the kids doing handstands up against the wall. They're just going about their day playing as kids, but you juxtapose that image of them upside down, and then pretty soon after or before, I can't remember, there's upside down slaughtered sheep hanging on the hooks in the slaughterhouse where the main character works. So the juxtaposition of those two upside down humans and sheep, what does that symbolically mean to you? I have some ideas, but what did that symbolic? Are you saying that kids growing up in these conditions are led to slaughter like the sheep? Or I'll ask you, what are you going for with that?
Well, two things is, I never thought about it the way you mentioned it. I
Yeah,
mean, I didn't want, this whole metaphor to carry over, like people in the community with sheep being slaughtered. And
yeah,
that was too simplistic in a way.
yeah,
What I wanted to do was the kids were looking at adults and copying them. They were learning how to survive and play, following adults' progression or whatever it is. And
yeah.
they were witness to that. They were witness to a man being kicked out of the house with his wife pointing a gun at him. Um, living dangerously, trying to push a railroad car over a person or something like that. And driving reckless. It's from a kid's point of view. And
Right.
then and also and how they relate to the other, like women, kids. They grow up with this attitude that like when we were coming up, we had got all the wrong information from older kids. How women like to be treated.
Yeah.
We copy that, and then you see that earlier when kids and boys and girls, they have this uh, uh, DNA sort of like about not related to girls properly. And so you see this when we were making the film, we found that it was difficult getting girls and boys to be in the same scene together because they had this built-in issue about each other. Like young girls like older boys, and younger and boys like older girls, but they at the same age. It was That was the hardest part of the film is having kids the same age be together, girls and boys. You know,
That's
and
funny.
but yeah, we came with these false notions about each other. Got it
Nice.
from adults. You know, and they carry it on as they get older. And so there's a lot of tension because of this mistaken judgment of who we are as people and what we're supposed to be doing. I got some, but the worst I got about women and advice was some older guys. You know, and you say, well, you hear a story about how women, single parent women, a lot of them got mistaken uh, habits
Yeah.
from from different sexes, how they're supposed to treat each other. And so the irony is there. And in the very beginning, when it when the father tells the guy and the boy, I don't care if someone protects your brother, I don't care what he did, you protect him. And so you learn the worst things at the very beginning, just out of survival. There's
Yeah.
all this mix-up there's film is about. This misinstruction and attitudes and things. We're all told the wrong way. And I mean, the first contradiction is when your father tells or mother tells I don't care what happened to your brother, you don't let no one, I don't care if he's right or wrong, he doesn't come home bleeding or crying. You go out and you protect your brother. If he had to pick up a brick or whatever it is, you know what the hell, whoever's on your brother. And so you learn these bad habits. And it contradicts a lot of things you grow up in church and things like that. And that's what part of the film is about.
Yeah.
Of learning how to be adults and men, all for the wrong reasons.
Absolutely. Well, I love hearing what the the meanings and what the movie meant to you and why you made it. I said some of the symbolic things that I was reading into it. You say maybe that wasn't even your conscience. I thought when Charlie Chaplin in modern times dissolved from the sheep to the factory workers, I thought you were doing something similar with this line. But the cool thing about art is we all bring meanings, and plenty of critics and filmmakers I've read into it over the years, and Killer of Sheep made the Sight and Sound top 100 films of all time with legends like Chaplin's City Lights and Hitchcock's Rear Window and Godard's Breathless, like Truffaut's 400 Blows, Kurosawa's Rashomon. Like, you were with the greatest filmmakers. So how honored are you to be voted on a list like that by fellow critics and directors around the world? They all get together and they vote for your movie to be in the pantheon of the greatest ever. How honored are you?
Well, I tell you what, when I went to a very poor school in South Central, and I remember sitting in this room, and the teacher telling all of us, he's going down the aisle and pointing out to students and saying, "You're not going to be anything, and you're not going to be anything." Then we got to me, he says, "You're not going to be anything," and he started laughing off and say, "Yeah, all right." And
Yeah.
then I remember it haunted me for years and years and years. And then I remember getting this award, and I said, "This, I wish this guy was here now." You know, I said, "Yeah, I was a sort of bad student in some ways. We all were bad,
Yeah.
but I went to school. I never knew what school was about. You know,
Yeah.
it was like, why am I here? Just to keep from being in the streets, whatever it is. So it was the wrong idea. But if I had understood what I was supposed to be doing, what school was for, I'd have been a different person. Maybe not a filmmaker, but
Yeah.
maybe a lawyer, doctor. But I played the trumpet, and I was very good at it, by the way. But anyway, I missed that because everyone when we were growing up in the neighborhood thought we were going to be uh, Satchmo, Miles Davis, or somebody. And so we had all these dreams of being these famous musicians and things. Yeah, so we had something. Well, that was the only thing that saved us, and so other things too. But it was a lot of us made it in spite of everything. And I always
Right.
wanted to be a something photography because I used to get these magazines and look at Dorothea Lange and you name it, everybody, and these old photographers. But I never had a chance to get a camera until I did get a camera. And the bad thing about it was when I first came with 35 camera, I would start shooting this photojournalists and stuff in my neighborhood. And then I shot the scene where this girl, it was a true story, this truth case where this girl had died of an overdose and she was laying out in the doorway of her apartment. And I had this camera. So I ran up there and the police all around. I started shooting everything. And her cousin came. She had this, like, it wasn't polio, but something very like it. And she come hobbling up to a block away. And she got to me, and her cousin was laying out there on the floor. And she said, why are you shooting tragedies? And I said something stupid. I realized, how stupid can you get to say that? And then she sort of hobbled away. Didn't get upset or show me anything, which you should have. And I packed my camera away and said, forget that. That's not what I want to do. Take advantage of people who are, stressed and all sorts of things. And that was it. So, but anyway, later on, I got a camera and went to making films and make my own stories.
Yeah. Well, you showed that professor that said that you weren't going to amount to anything. Well, hey, I know we got to run, but I do want to tell people that, Killer of Sheep in April, they're going to be putting out a new 4K restoration of that in theaters in April as well. So stay tuned for that. But first, don't miss it. Everybody, check out the 4K restoration of your long lost feature, The Annihilation of Fish, the 1999 film. It's going to be back in theaters in New York on February 14th and then select theaters nationwide. Everyone check it out. Charles Burnett, thank you so much. It was an honor to talk with you.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure too. Thank you so much as well.
All right. And thanks for everything you've done for filmmaking as well. Not just thank you for this interview, but thank you for the many filmmakers who had careers because of you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.